Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Joe.
And this is CrimeDivers.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode.
Hello everyone.
So today we have a lot-a-sode.
We do.
So where in the world are we?
We are in America.
And what is the name of your case?
It is called The Dating Game Killer.
Okay. Do you want to dive in?
Let's dive in. So...
What are you laughing at?
Because I was like, what are you doing?
I've got a hole in my bra.
Well, it's not a time to look at it, is it? Anyway, me and Jill privately had a conversation, and I told her after I don't know if it was my last case, but I did the case of the vampire of Dusseldorf, didn't I? And he was a serial killer. And I said to you the last time I was not doing another serial killer because it just was going on and on and on and on about how many murders he had. Well, I clearly didn't do that for very long because this one's a serial killer as well.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I just found it interesting and I just thought, oh,
So in future I'm just not going to listen to a word you say?
Well, yeah, I was just like, stop being silly. You've found an interesting case, so just do it. And yeah, I did.
Okay, so do you want to dive in?
Yes. And also, sorry, before we start as well, there are some names on here that I think are maybe not easy to pronounce at times, so I do apologise now if I get anything wrong. I'll obviously try my best to...
Just try your hardest,
Yeah,
you'll be fine.
That's... well, I'll take a leaf out of your book.
Listen, I am the queen of not being able to pronounce anything. Even normal words, can't talk properly,
Well, our last case, there was a couple of times when you couldn't even pronounce a blooming dentist.
Well...
Well, I don't know the word dentist, but I mean...
I was just going to say that. It wasn't, just in case anybody hasn't listened to the last case, it wasn't... I can say dentist perfectly fine, thank you. It was a specialist dentist name that I'm not even going to bother try and pronounce, because I can't even remember what it was now.
But if you've listened to the last one, you'll probably know what I mean.
Yeah, so, yeah. Okay, Jill can't pronounce things. This is Laura's case, so
Yes.
let's go.
Let's dive in. So, Rodney Alcala, who was born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucor.
Wow. Is it
Yeah.
Spanish or something?
He was born on the 23rd of August 1943 in San Antonio, Texas, to a Mexican-American couple
okay.
called Raul Alcala Bucor and Ana Maria Gutierrez. So that his parents were
Okay.
also they were
Mexican.
Mexican-American, yeah, they're Mexican. So in 1951, the family actually relocated to Mexico after, but after 3 years, their father just abandoned them. So he decided that he wanted to relocate the whole family to Mexico, and then after 3 years, he just went, nah.
You just left them there.
Yeah, just abandoned them.
Lovely. Where did he go? Back to America?
I don't know. I didn't figure out where he went. He just went off, and that was it. So in 1954, when Rodney was about 11, his mother moved him and his two sisters back to America to suburban Los Angeles. So in 1961, at the age of 17, Rodney joined the United States Army and he served as a clerk. In 1964, after having a nervous breakdown which saw him go AWOL and hitchhike to his mother's house, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder by a military psychiatrist, and he was discharged on medical grounds. So after leaving the army, Rodney graduated from the Alcala School of Fine Arts and later studied film at New York University. So he still did alright for himself, to be fair. And obviously, as this is a true crime case, you have to expect that this story is going to take a turn for the worse. So I'm sure there's no surprise that I'm going to tell you that Rodney Alcala was not a good man. So he sounds like a good man, but he's not a good man.
Figured that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that.
Just thought I would say that, just in case anybody thought that he was sounding too nice.
Just in case anybody thought this was actually going to be a nice story.
Yeah, it's not. Spoiler alert, we're doing a true crime case. Anyway, I'm clearly not a comedian.
No.
So, Alcala committed his first known crime on the 25th of September 1968. That was just over a month after his 25th birthday. An eyewitness called police after watching him lure an 8-year-old girl named Tali Shapiro into his apartment. When police arrived, thankfully Tali was alive, but she had been beaten with a steel bar and raped.
He beat an 8-year-old with a steel bar and raped her. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
By the way, trigger warning, there's going to be rape in this case.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forget about these things. And young victims.
Right.
So Alcala had somehow been able to escape, so the police didn't catch him. So a warrant was issued for his arrest, but Alcala, he'd actually left the state. He enrolled in the NYU Film School, so the New York University Film School, using the name John Berger. He actually successfully managed to evade capture, and in 1971, so that was 3 years later, so he still had been captured. He obtained a counselling job at a New Hampshire arts camp for children using a slightly different name of John Berger. So originally changed it to Berger, which is Berger, but then he changed it to John Berger, like a hamburger.
Yeah, like the guy in Sex and the City that broke up with her with a post-it note.
There you go, yes, that's right.
His name was Berger, wasn't it?
His name was Berger, yeah. I remember, yes.
Can't remember his first name though.
No, but yeah,
I don't know if it was John, but I remember it was Berger.
Yeah, right.
So he's did you say a camp for kids?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, he's in a New
Great.
Hampshire arts camp for children.
What year was that?
That was in 1971.
Right, okay, so clearly so clearly they didn't have checks in place.
Probably not then, no.
But then again, if he's got a different name, but then...
Yeah, but it clearly shows how easy that he's changed his name.
Well, yeah.
Technically twice there, because he's had his obviously original name, then he's changed it to the Berger, the Berger, and then for some reason, I'm not sure why, because I don't think he'd done anything.
Well, maybe he had done something, but just hadn't been caught for it, and just thought, well, I'll change my name anyway, so...
But then changed it to Burger, and then the hamburger, instead of Berger, which, yeah. But anyway, here. So he was known as John Berger. So in June of 1971... obviously this is a sort of separate thing, a woman called Cornelia Michael Crilly, she was 23, she was a flight attendant, and she was found raped and strangled in her Manhattan apartment. The police had no idea who the murderer was, and this remained unsolved until 2011.
Right.
So the reason I mention it now is because it's obviously going to come back later on in the story. So in early 1971, the police had added Alcala to their list of the 10 most wanted fugitives, because obviously he'd committed this crime in 1968 and they still hadn't been able to track him down. So a few months later, 2 children who were at the arts camp actually noticed his photo on an FBI poster at a post office. So they obviously notified the police, or told their parents or whatever, who notified the police. And Alcala was actually arrested and extradited to California. So by then, Tally, who's been the victim from 1978,
the 8-year-old, yeah.
The 8-year-old, her and her family had actually relocated to Mexico, and her parents refused to let her testify at the trial.
Right.
So he'd obviously been arrested for that incident, but she was, obviously, I guess they didn't want her to relive the trauma of it or something.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of understand, but I suppose in some ways it's a shame because she would obviously be the key witness because she was the victim. And
yeah, I know, but people just, they'll be thinking she's been through enough.
Yeah, exactly, which I totally understand that. So obviously, so she was refused to testify by her parents at the trial. So since the authorities were unwilling to charge him with rape and attempted murder without their primary witness, Alcala was convicted of child molestation and sentenced to 3 years. So because, unfortunately, Tally wasn't allowed to, be a witness, he couldn't be charged for the rape and attempted murder.
Right.
Which is frustrating because it then may have stopped him doing other things.
Well,
but I totally understand from a victim's perspective that she was a young girl at the time and it would have been very traumatic, I'm sure. So I totally understand, why. Well,
that's it. I mean,
didn't want to let her relive that because.
Well, if your child had been through something that bad, would you want her to relive it?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's it. They'd obviously moved on. She was obviously, in her teens by this time, so she probably was just trying to get on with her life and didn't want to, take a step back in history to what had happened to her. But I mean, he was sentenced to 3 years, so he did get a form of punishment.
He got something,
So Alcala was paroled in 1974 after serving 17 months of the 3-year sentence. But less than 2 months after his release, he was actually rearrested for assaulting a 13-year-old girl who was identified in court records as Julie J. She had accepted what she thought was just a lift to school. So Alcala served another 2 years in prison for basically breaking his parole.
He obviously just can't help himself, can he?
Well, exactly, because I mean that was, let's say, less than 2 months after he was released. He assaulted that girl. But thankfully, obviously she was okay, and he was hauled back to prison. So after Alcala's release again, which is I find crazy, his Los Angeles parole officer took the unusual step of allowing a repeat offender and a known flight risk to travel to New York City. Because normally, my understanding is when you go on parole, you've obviously got restrictions of what you can and can't do. And I would imagine you wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere significantly far, but he was allowed to basically go to another state and travel to New York City.
Oh.
So it is believed that a week after arriving in Manhattan, Alcala killed a woman called Ellen Jane Hoover. She was 23 years old and the daughter of the owner of the popular Hollywood nightclubs. I don't know if it's Ciro's. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ciro's. Ciro's.
No idea.
I don't think it'd be Ciro's. Ciro's. Never heard of it personally, but it must have been popular back in those days. Her remains were found buried under heavy rocks on a hillside overlooking the Hudson River. Then in 1978, Alcala worked briefly at the Los Angeles Times as a typesetter. He was interviewed by police from members of the Hillside Strangler Task Force.
Right.
I don't know if you heard of the Hillside.
Yeah, I've heard of the Hillside Strangler. Yeah.
And that was as part of their investigations of known sex offenders, because obviously they were trying to identify who the Hillside Stranglers were at the time.
Yeah.
So he was interviewed as part of that, but Alcala was ruled out from that, but he was arrested and served a brief sentence for possession of marijuana.
Right.
So he was not a Hillside Strangler.
Yeah. Well, we know that.
Well, we know that. Well, some people might not know that, I suppose, but yeah, that's a separate case, of course. So
that we haven't done.
No, that we haven't done, no. We haven't done. But I do believe it's quite a well-known case.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
I don't really know much about it. I mean, I'd heard of the name of it, but I don't really know much of the ins and outs.
Yeah, I've listened to a podcast about it before, so, but we all know my memory isn't that great.
That's very true. Probably could be a new case to you, to be fair.
Well, yeah, it could be. Listen, some of the cases that we did like nearly 2 years ago are probably new cases to me again because I can't remember them.
To be fair, I would probably be the same actually, because there was one of my friends that lives in Australia. She was like oh, I really enjoyed this case that you did, and I was like, what happened in that case again? And I had to actually go and look.
That's so bad, and that's not because we're disrespectful, by the way. That's just because our memories are so bad, aren't they?
I know, but to be fair, we've obviously done a lot of cases, so it's hard to remember every detail of every case.
We have done over 100 regular cases, and then I think there's maybe over 30 cases on Patreon.
So it is hard to remember.
Specifics, yeah, of course. Like I remember like names and what the victims and things like that. It's just the actual details. But
just because she said it was so horrific, and I was like, because she told me and I was like, oh, like which one was that? And I had to go and actually just double check, and I was like, oh yeah, I remembered one.
Yeah,
but so it's so it's probably like a new case to us all the time, isn't it? So anyway, back to the case. So he served his brief sentence for possession of marijuana. So he also convinced hundreds of young men and women that he was a professional fashion photographer, and he photographed them for his portfolio, and there was also page after page of naked teenage boys. So clearly, he was feeding his own sick fantasies by the sounds of it.
Yeah, he was just doing it for his own personal thing. He wasn't actually professionally a photographer.
And again, I'm assuming back in those days, I mean, people just took you for your word a lot, rather than, because I mean, to me, if somebody came along to me and was like, oh, I'm a professional photographer and I want to photograph you, I'd be like, well, show me your proof, like, where's your ID,
We've learned a lot from the 70s, because that's when a lot of the serial killers were. They were in the 70s.
Yeah.
And from
all so trusting of what they were saying to them. And
so that all that stuff that happened there, and that's taught us to be more careful. If not us, like, personally, but people to be more careful. And that's why, not just why, but it'll be part of the reason why there is so many checks and things in place now, because all the awful things that have happened in the past.
Well, I know, because he's obviously just come along and went, oh, I'm a professional photographer, and these girls and boys are like, all right, brilliant. They're just quite happily posing for photos because maybe they want to, I don't know, they want to obviously do something like model or be in film or something like that. So yeah, it's scary to think back then that was so easy for somebody like that just to go off
to be able to do that. Yeah,
and people obviously believed that was the case. So this brings us on to me explaining the title of this case, because the case is called the
dating game
killer. So you probably wonder why it's called that. So in 1978, Alcala was actually a contestant on the popular game show, which was called The Dating Game.
Okay. Is that like Blind Date?
I was just going to say, it was basically a US version of what we know as Blind Date.
Right.
So basically, for anybody that doesn't know these things, like you have a contestant that comes along, and normally you have like three other, like, so basically say like a male contestant comes on as the main contestant, and then you'll have three females who are behind the screen, and they obviously have to like
ask questions
and stuff like that, and then at the end of it, this person or male would pick
which one they want to go
on a date with, and vice versa. If it was like a female main contestant, then you would have three males, and they pick one. So that's basically what it is.
I used to love Blind Date.
I know.
Back in the day, because we were old, like when it's Saturday night TV, you didn't have much choice on what to watch, did you? Because we had like 4 channels.
Such a popular program, and Cilla Black.
Yeah.
Bless her.
So I used to love Blind Date.
Yeah, because I think, and then didn't they bring it back? Because obviously went away for.
I didn't watch it when they brought it back.
But did she do it? I think did Cilla.
No, I thought it was Paul O'Grady.
Oh, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, no, it wasn't Cilla, was it? Yeah.
Cilla died.
Well, I know, but they brought it back when she was still alive.
Did they?
Yeah. She only died a few years ago, not that long ago.
I don't know.
But yeah,
I only watched it back in the day.
Yeah, no, but it was good.
So basically, that's what the dating game is.
A US version of that. Yeah. So the host was Jim Lang, I think is pronounced, and he introduced Alcala as a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the darkroom at the age of 13, fully developed.
Yeah.
Well, he was obviously developing pictures in the darkroom. That's what he was saying.
So basically,
he was pretending that he was some photographer. That's what he described himself as.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, so his dad just they just randomly had a darkroom, did they? And
yeah, well, I know that's what. Yeah, but that's what this.
Right. Yeah, that's obviously him just making it up.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently it said, and it also said sort of between him taking photos, you might find him skydiving or motorcycling.
Skydiving.
And I'm like, yeah, that was obviously a lie because none of that was true.
Well, maybe like now, like skydiving, but back then, did a lot of people do skydiving?
I have no idea because I haven't thought jumping out of planes was a thing. Back then. I mean, I know there was obviously planes, but that was like.
Well, I wouldn't have thought
70s,
it would
that
be...
was late 70s, so I mean...
Well, I wouldn't have thought it would be very popular. Like, not a lot of people would do it.
Well, yeah.
So that's probably why he said they'd done it, because it probably seems like a right daredevil thing to do. No. Like, I don't know anybody who's done that before kind of thing.
So I do it, but obviously we know that was a complete lie, because he didn't skydive. I can't tell you if he motorcycled.
Well, that's more believable.
Yeah, and he certainly wasn't a photographer, as we know, because he just lied about that as well. I mean, he did take photos, I guess, because he did take photos of these people, but
he wasn't a professional
photographer yet.
I mean, we can all take photos.
Well, exactly. I can take a good photo. Especially with our cameras that we have these days.
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a photographer, though.
Well, no, definitely not. Anyway, so a fellow Bachelor contestant later described Alcala as a very strange guy with bizarre opinions. So Alcala won. He won the competition, and he was.
So he was the.
So the female. The female was the one that was picking the dates.
I was just about to say because I was thinking he was the one who was picking.
He was the one of the 3 male contestants.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's clearly why he probably made himself sound amazing, because he would have described himself to her. Yeah,
and he's used to lying, so he just probably made up a load of bullshit.
Exactly. So he obviously sounded quite good, because he was actually picked as the date in that episode. But the Bachelorette, who was called Cheryl Bradshaw, she actually, after the show, she refused to go out with him because she found him creepy. So they didn't end up going on the date.
So he was very good at bigging himself up, but then when she met him, he obviously had some kind of...
something about him that she didn't like. And she was like, actually, I'm not going on a date with you here.
Oh, good for her.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, because, I mean, she might have just thought, I have to go along with this because...
Well, she might have, yeah.
It's part of the show and...
I would have thought there might have been, like, a sort of contract that she had to go.
Because I don't know what... I mean, obviously, I've course, never watched this version of the show, so I don't know what their dates would have been like, because I know, like, for in Blind Date here, I mean, sometimes they would go on holiday and stuff, wouldn't they? They'd actually go on a holiday for like a week. I've seen
Did
that.
they? Yeah. Was that not on Take Me Out? They went somewhere foreign.
No,
I don't know. I can't remember.
I'm sure they went on holidays in Blind Date.
I have no idea.
I mean, it might have just been a date. I suppose back in those days it wouldn't have been like jetting off on holidays, would it? It probably would have been just a date. But no, she refused to go with them.
Well, good on her, because she could have been another victim.
I was just going to say, it's probably a good choice she
Yeah.
made there not to do that.
I bet you once she realised who he was, she would have been thanking her lucky stars, like.
Definitely breathed a sigh of relief, definitely. So it's actually thought that his rejection probably gave him the desire to go on another murder spree. And, you know, because at the end of the day, no one likes rejection, and especially not serial killers. I don't think they probably think, well, that's it, I'm off.
Well, I suppose that's a public rejection as well, because surely, because it's a TV programme, they would have had to have said that on the TV, because they film the date, don't they? And then...
Exactly, so they would have probably had to say on their next episode that they didn't go on their date or whatever. So so he's been publicly rejected. So, you know, he's thought, well, that's it, somebody else is I'm going to take this out.
Assuming that they've told the truth and they've not actually just made up some excuse as to why they didn't go on the date.
I don't know how that was played out.
They might have saved his sort of dignity by and not embarrassed him on TV. I don't know, but because they might have said, like, due to a family illness or something, they didn't go on the date, or just unforeseen circumstances. So they might not have actually said, well, she dumped him.
But obviously he knew he'd been rejected.
Well, yeah, I mean, personally he knew he'd been rejected, but I was just wondering if it was, like, sort of public or not.
No, I don't know if it was. But anyway, so yeah, they thought that that's probably why he went on another killing spree. So Robin Samso, who was a 12-year-old girl, she disappeared somewhere between the beach and her ballet class on the 20th of June 1979. Sadly, her decomposing body was found 12 days later in the Los Angeles foothills. So Robin's friends had told police that a stranger had approached them on the beach, asking to take their pictures. Which, because, you know, he likes to take pictures. Police circulated a search of the photographer, and Alcala's parole officer actually recognised that it was him, because I think the girl was obviously given a description. And they've circulated a description of him, and his parole officer has actually recognised that it probably was maybe him.
Right.
So the police began to search for him, and they searched his mother's house. And in his mother's house, they actually found a rental receipt for a storage locker in Seattle. And in the locker, they actually found some evidence, which was actually Robin's earrings. They found them, so for some reason taken her earrings. And
a lot of them do that, though. They keep them as trophies.
Yeah, that's why I'm assuming that's probably what it was. Because I don't know why else you would want a pair of earrings, really. So Alcala was arrested in the July of 1979, and it had taken the police, you know, a good few weeks to track him down, and he was held without bail. So in 1980, he was tried and convicted and sentenced to death for Robin Samso's murder, but the verdict was actually overturned by the California Supreme Court because jurors had been improperly informed of his prior sex crimes. So that actually got overturned. See, it just shows you though, like, you know, that can screw up a case just by things like that. How many times I've heard that so many times that cases have been thrown out, overturned because of people either being not informed about something, or people on the jury that, you know about stuff. It's just crazy. So in 1986, after a second trial, he was again convicted and sentenced to death. So that was. So obviously he obviously was in jail for a good few years, but in 2001, a court of appeals nullified the second conviction, and that was in part because a witness was not allowed to support Alcala's contention.
Oh, great.
I don't know what I've said.
Laura can't read her own writing.
No, I don't actually know what I've wrote, because I've wrote support Alcala's contention. And I wrote, the park ranger who found Robin Samso's body had been hypnotised by police investigators. Right, okay. Sorry, I think that's what I've meant to write. So, a witness was not allowed to support Alcala's contention that the park ranger who found Robin Samso's body had been hypnotised by police. So basically, Alcala was saying that he thought that the park ranger had been hypnotised by police investigators. which I'm not...
Is that a thing? Do police investigators...
Well, I don't think that... Yeah, exactly.
hypnotise people?
I think he basically was trying to say that this guy was...
Well, I've never heard that before.
Yeah. I don't know what I've kind of wrote there, but yeah. We'll skip that and we'll carry on. So while preparing their third prosecution in 2003, investigators learned that Alcala's DNA sampled under a new state law matched semen left at the rape murder scenes of 2 women in LA. Additional evidence, including another cold case DNA match in 2004, led to Alcala's indictment for the murder of 4 additional women. Those victims were Jill Barcombe, who was 18. She was a New York runaway who was found, quote, rolled up like a ball, unquote, in a Los Angeles ravine in 1977. She was originally thought to have been a victim of the Hillside Strangler. But
right.
Obviously, they've realised that she was actually a victim of Alcala instead. There was Georgina Wickstead, who was 27. She was bludgeoned in her Malibu apartment in 1977. And there was Charlotte Lamb, who was 31, and she was raped, strangled, and left in the laundry room of an apartment complex in 1978. And there was also Jill Parentine, who was 21, and she was killed in her apartment in 1979. All the bodies were found... they were found posed in carefully chosen positions.
All right.
So it obviously left them in certain ways.
Yeah, he posed them.
Yeah, basically posed them. Yeah. And another pair of earrings found in Alcala's Seattle storage locker had residue that matched Charlotte Lamb's DNA. So I don't know if earrings was maybe a thing that he liked to keep from his victims.
Sounds like it.
Does sound like it. So during his time in prison, between the second and third trials, Alcala actually wrote and self-published a book called You, the Jury. So I don't know why he was allowed to publish it.
Yeah, I thought you weren't allowed to do that because, you're making profit. It's like making profit from a crime.
I mean, I don't know if he...
From your crime.
Yeah, if he... I don't know if he was ever paid anything for these things, but he certainly self-published the book, so maybe he just wrote the book and, that's what he did. And in which he claimed that... He actually claimed his innocence in the Robin Somoza case, and suggested he actually suggested a different suspect. Which,
okay.
If you're trying to deny that you've done a murder, then of course you would.
Well, he's probably just pretending that he's a police officer now.
And he also filed 2 lawsuits against the California penal system for a slip and fall incident and for refusing to provide him a low-fat diet.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, well, I'm not being funny, buddy, but you've...
Get what you're given.
Exactly, you've committed a crime, you're in prison, you don't get to choose what you eat.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you're obviously fed adequately, because they obviously have to feed the prisoners.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
I don't think you've got any right to dictate, unless you've got, maybe an allergy or something, then I could understand that.
Yeah, if you've got, your lactose and
or
gluten intolerant, celiac, all that kind of stuff, no, you get what you're given. You're in jail, you're in prison. That's the whole point. You're being punished.
Exactly. You're not there for luxuries.
No.
So I thought that was quite funny.
What knob?
That he thought you could just file lawsuits to do that. I think. But yeah.
He must have been bored.
I know.
Just try to fill his time.
Clearly. So in 2003, prosecutors entered a motion to join the Robin Samso charges with those of the newly discovered victims. Alcala's attorneys, of course, they contested it, but the California Supreme Court ruled in the prosecution's favour, and in February 2010, Alcala stood trial on the 5 joint charges, so he was now getting charged for Robin Santos' murder along with the other 4 I told you about earlier, which I thought was quite good.
Yeah.
Because, he should... But it just shows you how long this has actually all taken.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
what are we, 2000?
We're in 2003 now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously,
and that was the 70s.
Exactly. So, he was in prison from the late 70s, and obviously, I mean, we're in the third round of it now because the first 2 had been overturned.
But at least when he's in prison, then he's not attacking other people.
Yeah, exactly. So thankfully, that's something. So for the third trial, Alcala decided to act as his own attorney. And
that sounds like a good choice.
Well, I actually found this quite... I know obviously this is a funny part of it, if you can find any fun in it. But so he took to the stand in his own defence, and for 5 hours he actually played the roles of both interrogator and witness, asking himself questions.
Oh, come on.
But addressing himself as, quote, Mr. Alcala in a deeper than normal voice. And then answering them during his self-questioning and then, you know, and so he would change like his voice.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's why I was like, come on. I can just picture it.
So
Yeah. It's like two different characters.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I'm like, that's quite laughable in that way, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I get it. It's not funny. It's
obviously not funny because it's a serious thing, but the fact that he was...
But to me, that just sounds like he's making a mockery of it.
Well, yeah, and it just sounds ridiculous.
It just sounds like he's not taking it seriously by doing that. Like,
but then the fact that they allowed that...
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think if I was one of the victims' family, I don't think I wouldn't. You wouldn't be finding it funny. You would be thinking, "What the hell? Why are they letting this guy do this?
Well,
he's taking the piss."
Yeah, because to me that's almost what it sounds like. He's just making a bit of fun out of it.
Yeah, that's awful.
I thought that was just rather strange because I've never known anybody to be, one, allowed to do that, and then two, to actually change your voice whether you're answering and asking the question. It does seem a bit strange.
Yeah.
So during his question and answering session, he told the jury that he was at Knott's Berry Farm, which actually is a theme park.
Okay.
It's not a farm.
Okay.
I know, because I was like, oh, Knott's Berry Farm. And then I was like, oh, what is Knott's Berry Farm? But when I clicked on it, I was like, oh, it's actually a theme park.
Okay.
So he said that he was at Knott's Berry Farm applying for a job as a photographer at the time that Robin Samso was kidnapped. He showed the jury a portion of the dating game episode that he appeared on in an attempt to prove... This is again, I was really confused about this, because it said that he showed the jury the portion of the dating game episode that he appeared on in an attempt to prove that the earrings found in his Seattle locker were his and not Robin's. So I was like...
What was he wearing them?
Well, that's what I didn't understand, because it doesn't really clarify that I'm like, well, if they were... Well, I don't know, because I don't know what the earrings looked like, so I don't know if he had his ears pierced or if he was wearing them during the episode. I thought, if you're going to show it to people, then does that mean you were wearing them? But
that's what I thought.
I don't really understand. There was no clarity on that. I couldn't understand exactly what it is, but clearly it didn't work anyway. So Jed Mills, who obviously he was one of the other contestants on the show, he told a reporter that, because this is a sort of backs up my thing. He told a reporter that earrings were not yet socially acceptable for men to wear in 1978. And he had said, quote, "I had never seen a man with an earring in his ear. I would have noticed them on him." So that's what I was confused about. I'm like, well, if he's shown him a portion of this episode, then clearly you would see whether he was wearing them. But then this guy's saying, well, I would have remembered him wearing them, so...
I don't know.
He never noticed, but I'm like, well, then the video evidence would prove either way.
Yeah, of course it would.
I don't really... It's quite a confusing thing of why that was even used, and then this guy saying, well, I don't remember him wearing any of them. And
that just doesn't seem to make sense.
Really wear earrings in that.
Yeah, so people would notice.
I don't know. So Alcala made no significant attempt to dispute the 4 added charges, other than to say that he could not remember killing any of the women. So he didn't really offer a defence.
Right, he just couldn't remember.
He just couldn't remember.
Convenient.
Yeah, exactly. So after less than 2 days of deliberation, the jury convicted him on all 5 counts of first-degree murder. There was a surprise witness during the penalty phase of the trial, and that was his first victim. It was Tally.
Oh, Tally.
Yeah, she actually did come at that point. But I mean, she would obviously
she would have been. Yeah, of course.
She obviously decided that she wanted to, come along to this one.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah, totally.
That must have been a brave thing to do.
I know. So Richard Rappaport, who was a psychiatrist, paid by Alcala, and the only defence witness, testified that borderline personality disorder could explain Alcala's claims that he had no memory of committing the murders. But the prosecutors argued that Alcala was, quote, a sexual predator, quote unquote, who knew exactly what he was doing was wrong and didn't care. So in March 2010, Alcala was sentenced to death for a 3rd time.
Wow.
So 3 times he's been sentenced to death. In March 2010, police released 120 of Alcala's photographs and sought the public to help identify them, because they thought that maybe there was more victims out there. So in the first few weeks, 21 women came forward to identify themselves, and at least 6 families said that they believed they recognised loved ones who disappeared years ago and were never found.
Wow.
As of July 2021, 110 of the original photos remain posted online as police continue to seek the public's help with further identification, so they've still not identified all of them. And after his 2010 conviction, in January 2011, a Manhattan grand jury indicted him for the murders of Cornelia Crilly, and that was the flight attendant that I told you about.
Yeah.
And Ellen Hover, who was the daughter of the man who owned the nightclub. So in June 2012, he was extradited to New York, where he was found guilty and sentenced to an additional 25 years to life. The death penalty had not been an option because in New York State they hadn't given the death penalty until 2007, so that they couldn't give him the sentence of death in that state.
Okay.
Because obviously in America they have different laws in different states, so they no longer had the death penalty in New York. So he was also linked to two other unsolved murders, two in the Seattle area. One was Antoinette Whitaker, who was 13, and that was in July 1977. Another one was Joyce Gaunt, who was 17, and that was in February 1978. That's where he had rented his storage locker, so that they linked him to those ones as well. And investigators in Marin County, California announced that they were confident that Alcala was responsible for the 1977 murder of 19-year-old Pamela Jean Lampson, and she had disappeared after agreeing to meet a man who had offered to photograph her, but unfortunately with no fingerprints or usable DNA charges were never filed. But the police are still convinced that he was responsible for her murder, but unfortunately they couldn't convict him for that. And so in September 2016, Alcala was charged with the murder of 28-year-old Christine Ruth Thompson, who had disappeared in 1977. In 2013, a relative recognised her from one of Alcala's photographs. Her body had been found in 1982, but it hadn't been identified until 2015. Alcala admitted to taking the photo, but not to killing Christine, who was approximately 6 months pregnant at the time of her murder. And Alcala, who was now 73, was reportedly too ill to make the journey from California to Wyoming to stand trial on the new charges, so he never actually got charged for that because of his ill health. And Rodney Alcala died of unspecified natural causes on the 24th of July last year, 2021, aged 77. So his death sentence was never carried out because he died before they...
But at least he was in prison.
I mean, he was in prison. Yeah. I mean, he spent, many years in prison. But obviously never actually got the death penalty.
Actually, I remember when he died, because I can remember listening to other podcasts and they're like, good news in the true crime world,
I mean,
that monster has died.
But then I kind of think that, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that he got off lightly because he did spend many years in prison, but, when you're sentenced to death, it's like it takes so long to get to that point. Yeah. Where, some obviously maybe do die of other causes and never actually suffer the way that they've been sentenced to suffer.
I just can't believe that he managed to go on TV on a dating site when he was already a convicted paedophile.
Because again, going back to having checks, I mean, I can guarantee you, if somebody had been convicted of child molestation in this day and age and they applied to go on a show,
there's
and
no
the background
way
checks were done, they would not even be allowed to go on the show. So it just shows you how we have come on.
Oh, aye.
That's good, but he should never have been allowed on TV.
No. Well, there's been people on over here on shows like, was there not somebody on like maybe Love Island or something like that, and they were already on the show, and then there was like tweets or something from I don't know if it was Love Island, can't remember, but there was some show, a reality show, And they were actually a contestant on it, but then while they were a contestant, there was tweets from years ago, and I think it was maybe like racist tweets or something like that. So they got taken.
Yeah, they got removed off.
They got removed off the show. So you know, it just goes to show. But they should have checked that maybe before they were put on the show. But at least,
but I mean, you know, I think it's scary though. But yeah, so
yeah, so.
Yeah, that was a lovely serial killer, wasn't it?
Yeah. So thank you to everybody for listening. And if you would like to join us on Patreon for some bonus content, then it's patreon.com/CrimeDivers. If you would like to get in contact with us or follow us on social media, our details are in the show notes.
And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.